Wow. Well, I'm hoping that people have got on Twitter and will come and find this new link, and that Steph will find her way back in. Not sure what happened there, but if I learned one thing in 2 years ago, it was that when everything seems like absolute pants, the thing to do is go out and come back in again. Steph, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, that is fantastic. So we've got nobody watching because it's a new link, because there wasn't a way to restart it. I've posted the new link on Twitter, and I'm hoping that people will join us. But we said right at the start, we don't care if nobody turns up. We can just talk together about that. I'm hoping that people will come along and find us. Yeah. What a nightmare, but it's okay. And Jenny can hear us both and see us. Sammy can hear us, and Sammy's tweeted it as well. So hopefully people will come and join us. How is this last 30 minutes joyful practice, Steph? Because I think this properly shows what it is that we do.
Yeah. I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, and thinking about how hard this last 12 months has been. Personally, actually, I was doing a bit of reflection, and underneath all of that, even if I have had to go into my shell a little bit and be quiet, what I see around me is people having that time. Sometimes we have to hold each other together, but we always find a way. We always find a way to make a difference somehow, whether it be small, whether it be big. But collectively, I think we always just dig deep and find a way to bring like a different energy to what we're doing, or bring a difference to the world, or and like you say, it doesn't matter if it's a big thing, a small thing, one person, 100 people. It's always just about making a difference in some way, shape or form, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And what it illustrates for me, and I think people listening will understand, we're not trying to justify here that something went wrong and we don't even know what it was. That moment is gone. Like, there's literally, oh, that's my robot Hoover. So it's going to be one of those. And, I used to think, oh my God, it's going to be one of those days. That's like everything's going to go wrong. It's about thinking, okay, so where are we now? Right in the minute. It's a really centered practice in the minute. And when I was banging on and nobody could hear me, that's what I was saying. I was saying that when we started this, when we had that phone call, when people joined us, we had no concept of 2 years from now. We were just all in a moment with the lockdown and the pandemic. And actually, that's part of the point, that we're not setting off and saying, where do we want to be in a year's time? We're doing exactly the opposite of what planning tells us to do, and like business guides tell us to do, and all of that. And what we balance, I think, really well in JoyFE is we do the work on ourselves to do the work. So during that 30 minutes where we couldn't figure it out, each of us was doing the work to do the work, was staying connected, and was absolutely there. And you see, I have just given Michaela the wrong link, so I need to just generate the YouTube link again. If somebody is listening, I'm thinking, Jenny or Sinead, if you are listening, please could you share the YouTube link in the chat group, because I've given poor old Michaela the wrong link and she's come to join us on the broadcast. And while I would very happily welcome us in, I think that might give her a bit of a shock. So I've shared the studio link, not the YouTube link.
Oh, okay, I get it.
But we just power on.
I think
what else have you been thinking?
What I have been thinking, what I was just thinking, freshest thinking as you were talking, Lou, was how it has always been about the moment in time. And we tend to, especially like in the magazine group, we have had that tendency to think, oh, we should be planning more, or we maybe need to think a bit more forward. But actually, it always works because we don't do that. It always works because we are what's the spirit of the moment. And sometimes it can feel a little bit unplanned, but we're constantly bringing it back to now, and constantly bringing it back to how do we hold ourselves together. And I think actually that is part of, like you said, the part of the magic of it all, which is not being drawn into traditional practices of business planning, or not that we're a business, but I mean that, you know, that all those processes that go in colleges every year, it's about business planning and it's about thinking about what we're going to do next year. And we've only just, sometimes it happens when you've just got past the first term and you've just got past term one, you don't have enough thinking, or you haven't built enough of a momentum to know where you want to go, but you've still got to put all that stuff together. And I'm not saying that that's not useful, because I know that's different in businesses, but actually there's something really magical about saying, constantly bringing it back to where are we right at this minute. And what I would say is there's something really special about being really flexible within that. So what we might want to do might change in a week's time because something else happens in the meantime. But what else have I been thinking? Generally, I've just been thinking about how much I've appreciated all of the spaces, whether I've been there or on the periphery. I've really appreciated the energy and the goodness of people who have just been part of JoyFE, have led all sorts of things, have put things out there, have created stuff. I've been willing to be in spaces that are hard at times. And I think I appreciate that because it's always about the greater good, and ultimately we're in that space to take it out into practice then in other spaces and really show people that there's a different way of doing things. For me, it's about connection. It just keeps coming back to connection. It comes back to relationships, and that space where we've built relationships, where relationships have changed, where things have evolved. There's so much learning to be had there. And I can't remember a different way of doing it anymore. I always think I couldn't imagine being where I was before JoyFE, because I was immersed in what is expected, what is typical. And I used to think something's off, you know, surely it's got to be a bit more human than this. So I can't imagine going back. I can't imagine being back where I was. Now I know what I know.
Yeah, no, I really get you. And I think one of the things that's been amazing about the 2 years, I don't know whether it was that we all started tuning into different stuff, but actually just how much we have read and heard and listened to, and how many practices across the world are really converging around, you know, these ways of working, often using different language, though the word joy pops up so much more than you think. So when I was sort of banging on at the start, I was thinking about how I know a lot of people listening have read or listened to Karen Walrond, her podcast with Brene Brown, and she talks about light making. And she talks about people like us as light makers, and we begin to see ourselves in that way. And that sort of helps us do the work on ourselves. But what she talks about that has really struck me is listening to the whispers. And, you know, when we have calls to activism, if you like, joyful activism. But actually, we have to be ready. We have to be ready to hear those whispers. Probably the whispers have been trying to reach me for 56 years. And I only started listening to them when we started working in this way, where we just stilled things down, where we think together in thinking environments, where we are cautious and careful about the way in which we speak to one another, whether that is in text or verbally, where we then listen back and actually give ourselves the chance to recognize what's happening in us. Joyce has just said in the chat that you can't quantify it, and it's really important not to quantify it. But I think it's challenging for people sometimes who are not involved because they can't quantify us. I mean, people are always asking us to explain what JoyFE is. I think we do that quite clearly, but we do it. It's like we're speaking in French sometimes to people who can't speak French because it is so quietly and persistently and radically different from other ways of working.
And that's really important, actually, is that we've never had anything that does, we've never tried to quantify anything, and we've always patiently re-explained what we're about and what we try to do. And there's been, some criticism there at times about who we are or what we're trying to do, and it being unicorns and rainbows and
Fluffy.
Yeah, yeah, fluffy. But actually, always, ultimately, I have always explained us as a group of people who are just trying to make a difference, because that's ultimately what we've been trying to do and what we do. And I find it, I think eventually people stopped asking me because they realised there wasn't a quantifiable, and we were never going to define it in that way. But yeah, I find that there's been some funny comments or interpretations, or they're the bits that I would love. Actually, people probably don't say exactly what they think, but I would love to have collected all of those things. What do you think we are?
No, that's really great. What we have done is Sinead's been pulling together people's appreciations of JoyFE. She's asked people their first memory of JoyFE, what they think it is, and also the funniest moments. So she's going to be publishing those later. I'm not going to, I'm not going to stop you keeping your powder dry there, Sinead. But one thing that someone said, I don't know who, and it really struck me was, we are good people making connections. And actually, that's so different from like networking, because we are good people coming together to share our joyful energy. And that means that when we have people in the room who are tired, who are frightened, who are angry, who are just really jaded and fed up with it all, they come in and to whatever the space is, whether that's reading the magazine or listening to the broadcast or coming to an IDs room or a writing room or a workshop, they come in and just be. And then they remember how to find that in themselves. And then another time, they'll be the ones with the joyful energy and we'll be the ones coming in. And as long as we can be truthful, and that's why we ask that important question, isn't it? How are you? Which is the practice of care.
Yeah, it's I was thinking about that, actually, the how are you. I think I always have asked people how are you, but probably not as intentionally as I do now. And yesterday, just like a small example, yesterday I was at the hospital, but every person that I dealt with in the hospital, like someone who worked there, I asked them how they were. As they said hi to me, I said, how are you? People are still surprised that you are genuinely interested. But the conversations I had because of that are just so different to like small talk about the weather or people just, I think it's really important that we genuinely acknowledge how we are in every space. And I think there is still, people will often say, yeah, I'm good, everything's good. And it's okay. I think my frustration, but it's not my frustration to be had really, is I'm so used to being in that, open. I'll answer that question very honestly. Sometimes, but it's still normal practice, isn't it, that people are not open and they're not comfortable to be open and they're not quite sure how to express how they actually are. People just say they're good and everything's great. I still find that really interesting, but I'll never change how I operate because I think it encourages others to be more open, which I think if people can be more open, that's where you find connection. And so I always encourage people, good, bad or ugly, to be open and say how they actually are. I find all of the work hard, at times, and a lot of the times this last 12 months for me in particular has been really tough. But I think, like you said before, Lou, we are committed to doing the work ourselves, and the way that I reckon with that is we're committed to do the work ourselves, to be the best version of ourselves going out into the world. And actually, I'm really interested in how the last 2 years in particular may have really got people on a roller coaster almost of change. I'm interested genuinely in how things, because we asked that question, it's been asked in lots of spaces, which is how have things changed for you because of COVID? I'm not sure there's always a lot of external visible changes. I'd say the changes for me have been very internal, and I'm really interested in how people feel differently, how people view things differently, how they've sort of reckoned with things differently. Because I think the last 2 years have been really significant, even if we still, to this day, don't know how to process all of that. But I am more than grateful that JoyFE has ultimately been the space where we have just reckoned with a lot of that, haven't we, of what existed, and we've questioned all of it, whether it be external stuff, whether it be internal stuff, whether it be us together. We have questioned all of it. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Is this the best that we can do?
Yeah, absolutely. Is this the best we can do in the spirit of the moment? I think really sums us up. We set out to do things differently. We do things so differently. I think for me, it's those small acts of joy, those micro joys, even when we're facing macro aggressions, that they make a difference, as you describe at the hospital there. I think it is the fact that we are tenacious around being pro-social, so opening spaces which don't get cliquey, which invite people in, which are welcoming. I really see the difference between closed spaces and open spaces over the last 2 years. I think we are tenacious about being anti-competitive, and that's the hardest work, because we say leave role, rank and ego at the door. The ego is hard for every single one of us, and having to practice humility with one another when we get things wrong, not taking on self-blame and shame, just really working on that. None of these practices are easy, but they are world changing. Steph, I'm really aware it's 8:30 and I'm sure we've taken up enough of people's time, but I just want to run people through what's happening today.
Yes, great.
So we'll be everywhere on social media. We've got huge numbers of people involved in creating. I mean, the creativity around our birthday is wonderful. So check out all our social media channels. During the day, around sort of from 10 o'clock onwards, we're going to be releasing a very special birthday playlist, Fab Friday FM. Sinead is putting together. So if anybody's got any ideas for that or extra tunes, then get them banged in there. Sinead is bringing together those appreciations to share around 4 o'clock, I think. We're publishing early our edition 21 of the magazine. Which has been, we've turned it round in just over 3 weeks, which is incredible. Not always easy, but really incredible. It's a wonderful edition. We're also publishing throughout the day. Hina Suleiman has been bringing us together to do little videos about JoyFE and what it means for us. So we're publishing those pockets of joy during the day. No more live sessions. I'm doing perfect timing. I'm doing a conference talk about JoyFE to Kirklees College today. So I'll have some tweets scheduled, which is a bit more about the sort of background and why and the whole joy stuff. And then we're back together again, 6 o'clock. We are doing a 2-hour workshop And the we is always different people. And I think that's what's really lovely. We're doing a 2-hour workshop for the JISC Community Fringe called We Are Bluebells, not branding, but building community. We're going to be running workshops on journaling, on Instagram, on TikTok, and on writing for the magazine. Then we move into a special birthday ideas room. We're wearing yellow today. I can see you maybe not be dressed, Steph, yet, but we're wearing yellow today. Oh, fantastic. That is absolutely brilliant. That's gorgeous, really gorgeous. So post your yellow photos. Special birthday ideas room. Bring your JoyFE cocktail, alcoholic or non-alcoholic. And then at the end of the day, I think at 9 o'clock, now we've remembered how to do it, we're going to be back on here, aren't we, Steph, in our pajamas, just doing some reflection from the day. So a bit of a high energy finish. Go and have a joyful day, everybody. And we will see you in all sorts of different spaces during the day. Goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Have a lovely day.
Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.